Moving into High Ridge Estates was supposed to be a dream come true. It was one of those high-end gated communities, the kind with perfectly trimmed hedges, driveways lined with imported stone, and streets so pristine they looked like they had been pressure washed daily. The houses weren't just homes, they were status symbols, each one uniquely designed yet somehow still uniform enough to meet the neighborhood's carefully crafted aesthetic. I had worked my entire career as a defense attorney to afford a place like this, and when I finally found a home that suited my needs, a beautiful modern build with plenty of space, I thought I had made it. I had handled high-stakes cases, defended people in courtrooms filled with scrutiny, and debated against some of the most ruthless prosecutors in the state. So dealing with an HOA shouldn't have been a big deal. Enter Karen. Karen was the self-proclaimed ruler of High Ridge Estates. You know, the type mid-50s, perfectly styled bob, expensive yet oddly outdated clothing, and the kind of superiority complex that made it seem like she had personally built the neighborhood from the ground up. The moment I moved in, I became her newest target. Maybe it was because I was younger than most of the homeowners in the area, or maybe it was because she couldn't stand the idea of someone new disrupting her perfectly curated community. Either way, she decided that I didn't belong. It started with passive-aggressive interactions. The first time we spoke, I was outside unpacking boxes, still adjusting to my new home. She marched up to me, clipboard in hand, her lips pursed like she had sucked on a lemon. "You must be the new tenant," she said, emphasizing the word tenant, like it was an insult. I raised an eyebrow. "Owner, actually." Her smile barely wavered, but I caught the flicker of surprise in her expression. "Oh," she said, clearly not expecting that. "Well, I'm Karen, head of the High Ridge Estates HOA. We have very strict guidelines here, and it's important that all residents, again that emphasis on the word, understand that this is a well-regulated community." I nodded. "Good to know." I should have left it at that, but I couldn't resist. "By the way," I added, offering her my most professional lawyerly smile, "I'm a defense attorney, so I'm pretty well-versed in regulations." Karen's expression froze. I swear for a split second, she looked like she had just swallowed a bug. But then, just as quickly, she regained her composure. "Oh, that's interesting," she said, her tone suddenly cautious. "Well, let's hope you never have to use that knowledge here." I should have known right then and there that she was going to be a problem. The next few weeks were an exercise in pettiness. Every time I so much as stepped outside, Karen found a reason to monitor me. If I parked my car in the driveway instead of the garage, she sent me a friendly reminder about HOA parking policies. If I left my trash bins out 30 minutes longer than she deemed appropriate, I got a note about keeping the neighborhood tidy. One time, she even had the audacity to knock on my door at 7 a.m. on a Saturday to tell me my grass was a quarter-inch too long. But the real tipping point, the day she tried to find me. I was at work when I got an email from the HOA, subject line, violation notice. It read, "Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that your property has failed to meet the standards of High Ridge Estates. You are in violation of Section 5, Article 12 of the HOA agreement, which states that all homes must adhere to community aesthetic guidelines. Your front door is not in compliance with our approved color palette and must be repainted to match HOA standards within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in a $500 fine. Sincerely, Karen H., HOA President." I stared at my screen, stunned. My front door. I had bought the house with that exact door color. I scrolled down and saw an attachment, a blurry photo of my perfectly normal dark walnut-colored door. Next to it was a PDF of HOA-approved colors, all of which were variations of beige, off-white, and muted gray. Karen had actually tried to fine me for having a door that wasn't boring enough. I smirked. This was going to be fun. I clicked reply and typed back, "Dear Karen, thank you for your concern. However, my front door color was approved by the previous homeowners and is well within my legal rights as a property owner. Additionally, per State Property Law 47.8, HOAs cannot retroactively enforce aesthetic changes on properties that were in compliance at the time of purchase. Please consider this formal notice that I will not be repainting my door, nor will I be paying any fraudulent fines. Sincerely, Mr. Stevens, Defense Attorney." I hit send and waited. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I picked up, already grinning. Hello? A pause. Then Karen's strained voice. Mr. Stevens, I just received your email. Great. Hope it was helpful. Karen cleared her throat. There's no need to be so hostile. I was simply enforcing the rules. I leaned back in my chair. Actually, Karen, you were attempting to enforce an invalid regulation against a homeowner who knows his rights. Silence. Then, in the most forced pleasant tone I'd ever heard, she muttered, I suppose we can make an exception. I chuckled. That's what I thought. I had won the battle. But Karen was just getting started. She had tried to bully me with HOA nonsense, and when that didn't work, she set her sights on something bigger. Because in Karen's mind, if she couldn't find me into submission, she would get rid of me completely. After my polite legal smackdown over the bogus fine, I foolishly thought Karen would back off. I was wrong. Instead of accepting that I wasn't someone she could bully, she escalated. The passive-aggressive emails multiplied, the violation notices became a daily occurrence, and soon, Karen had shifted from merely being an annoyance to full-scale harassment. Her first major stunt came 2 weeks after the door incident. I had just gotten home from a long day in court, ready to enjoy a quiet evening, when I noticed a group of people gathered in my front yard. Not just any people, Karen and a handful of HOA board members. I stepped out of my car, keeping my expression neutral. Evening, I said, walking up the driveway. Can I help you? Karen plastered on a fake, tight-lipped smile. Oh, Mr. Last Name. We were just discussing a community matter. I looked at the clipboard she was holding. In my front yard? She ignored that. We've received multiple complaints about your property from concerned neighbors, she continued, flipping through her clearly empty clipboard. Your grass height remains inconsistent, your mailbox is outdated, and most concerningly, she looked up, her eyes narrowing, there have been rumors that you are not an authorized resident of High Ridge Estates. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? One of the HOA board members, a mousy-looking guy named Steve, cleared his throat. Some of the neighbors say they've never seen your home purchase records. I let out a low laugh. Are you saying I don't own my own house? Karen pursed her lips. We just need to confirm your residency status. I stared at her. You want me to prove I own my house? She smiled thinly. We wouldn't want unauthorized occupants in the community. I had to admire the sheer insanity of what she was attempting. Karen had no legal right to demand my deed, lease, or any other proof of ownership. HOAs don't have the authority to evict people, and even if they did, I wasn't even breaking any rules. But this wasn't about rules. This was personal. I sighed dramatically. Well, Karen, I'm afraid I don't have my house deed on me at the moment, I said. But tell you what, I'll have my real estate attorney send over a copy. Would you like that? Karen's expression tightened. That won't be necessary, she snapped. Are you sure? I pressed, smirking now. Because legally, you have no right to demand proof of ownership from me. And if you try to push this issue any further, I'd be happy to file a formal harassment complaint. One of the HOA board members, Jim, the guy who always looked vaguely scared of Karen, cleared his throat. You know, Karen, maybe we should. Karen shot him a glare that could have melted steel. He shut up immediately. After a long, tense silence, Karen sighed dramatically. Fine, she said, waving a hand. I'll give you a pass this time. Oh, I said, grinning now. You'll give me a pass? How generous. Karen's jaw clenched. She turned on her heel and stormed off, her little minion scurrying after her. But I knew, even as I watched her leave, this wasn't over. She wasn't backing down. She was planning something bigger. And she was about to make her biggest mistake yet. I should have known Karen was cooking up something even dumber than her last attempt to harass me. She had tried fines, she had tried intimidation, and when that didn't work, she resorted to fraud. It started with a letter taped to my front door. I had just finished a long case at work and was looking forward to a quiet night when I saw it, an official-looking document, printed on thick paper, stamped with some nonsense OA insignia. I pulled it off the door and read it. Notice of trespass. To Mr. Stevens. It has been determined by the High Ridge Estates Homeowners Association that you are in violation of community residency guidelines and have been found to be an unauthorized occupant of the property located at 4850 High Ridge Estates. Effective immediately, you are hereby trespassed from the premises. You are ordered to vacate the property within 48 hours to avoid further legal action. Failure to comply may result in police intervention. Signed, Karen H., High Ridge Estates HOA President. I stood there, staring at the paper stunned. This lunatic had actually issued me a fake eviction notice. It was so absurd that I actually laughed out loud. There were so many things wrong with this document, I didn't even know where to start. First, HOAs don't have the authority to trespass people from their own homes. They can't evict homeowners, they can't invalidate a deed, and they sure as hell can't fabricate legal documents to enforce imaginary rules. Second, Karen had signed it herself. No law firm, no county court stamp, nothing official. Just Karen's big, loopy signature, like she thought she was the queen of High Ridge Estates. I smirked. She had just committed fraud. And the best part, she had done it in writing. I took a deep breath, folded the paper neatly, and grabbed my phone. It was time to teach Karen a very painful lesson. Before making my next move, I needed to make sure I had airtight proof that Karen was behind this. Sure, she had signed her name, but I wanted more. I went to my security camera footage because, unlike Karen, I actually thought ahead, and sure enough, there she was. 8:42 a.m. Karen, marching up my driveway like she owned a place, looking over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching before taping the notice to my door and speed walking away like a cartoon villain. Perfect. I downloaded the footage, made a copy of the fake notice, and sent both files to my work email. I wasn't just going to confront Karen. I was going to bury her. Conveniently, the HOA was holding their monthly meeting the next day at the community clubhouse. And since Karen had officially escalated this to a legal matter, I decided to handle it like I went in court, publicly with maximum humiliation. When I walked into the clubhouse, Karen was already there, holding court at the head of the table like she was some kind of medieval ruler. The HOA board members, her loyal minions, were seated around her, nodding along as she droned on about new parking regulations and lawn care policies. I walked in with purpose, the fake notice in one hand, my phone in the other. Karen, I said loudly, cutting through the chatter. We need to talk. Her eyes narrowed. This is an HOA meeting, she said sharply. If you have a complaint, you can schedule an appointment. I slapped the fake trespass notice onto the table. Go ahead and explain this, I said, my voice calm but firm. The room fell silent. Karen's face twitched when she saw the document. I have no idea what that is, she said quickly. I smirked. Oh, because it has your signature on it. She sat up straighter. That's a legitimate document, issued by the HOA in accordance with community regulations. I laughed. No, Karen, it's a forged legal notice. I turned to the HOA board. Let's get something straight. HOAs do not have the authority to trespass homeowners from their own property. That's called an eviction, and only a court can issue one. So unless Karen secretly moonlights as a judge, this document is completely bogus. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Steve, the mousy board member, cleared his throat. Karen, is this true? Karen snapped her glare toward him. I was acting in the best interest of the community, she insisted. We can't just allow random people to. I cut her off. Karen, I own my home. You know that. But you still tried to force me out with a fraudulent trespass order. And guess what? That's illegal. Karen blanched. I was just enforcing HOA rules. I pulled out my phone. Would you like to see security footage of you personally delivering this notice? Karen's face drained of color. The HOA board members whispered among themselves, some of them looking genuinely alarmed. Steve leaned forward, his forehead creasing with concern. Karen, you never told us you were doing this. Karen stammered. I didn't think I needed permission. I let out a low whistle. Wow. So you not only committed fraud, but you also went rogue without even consulting your own board. That did it. The board members turned on her immediately. You overstepped, Karen. You can't just fabricate legal documents. We could get sued for this. Karen looked panicked now. I was just trying to maintain community standards. I smiled. Well, congratulations. Because now, Karen, you're about to get some real legal attention. She froze. What? What do you mean? I pulled out my phone. I've already forwarded the fake notice to my attorney, I said smoothly. Expect to hear from law enforcement very soon. Karen's mouth fell open. You wouldn't. I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough for the whole room to hear. Karen, I'm a defense attorney. Do you really think I wouldn't? Karen sat there, completely frozen, as the reality of what she had just done crashed down on her. The HOA board members, who had once blindly followed her every word, now looked horrified, whispering among themselves about the legal consequences of what had just been revealed. I could see it in her face. She was realizing too late that she had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. Still, in true Karen fashion, she tried to bluff her way out. Why, you're exaggerating, she stammered, straightening her blazer as if that would somehow restore her authority. It was just a formal notice, nothing serious. A misunderstanding. I laughed out loud. A formal notice. I repeated, holding up the fake trespass order. Karen, you forge a legal document in an attempt to illegally remove a homeowner from their property. That's not just a misunderstanding. That's fraud and misrepresentation of authority. The room was dead silent. Karen's eye twitched. I held up a finger, cutting her off. Oh, I'm not done. I pulled out my phone and turned it toward the board members. This, I said, hitting play, is footage from my security cameras. I'd like you all to watch very carefully. The video showed Karen sneaking up to my house in broad daylight, looking around like a cartoon villain, and then taping the fraudulent notice to my door before scurrying away. One of the board members, an older woman who had always seemed skeptical of Karen, let out an audible gasp. Another board member, Jim, the spineless one, muttered, "Oh my God." I let the silence drag out, letting them all marinate in the evidence. Then, slowly, I turned back to Karen, who looked visibly sick. You were saying? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Karen swallowed hard. I didn't mean. I cut her off. Karen, I don't think you fully grasp the situation here. You tried to trespass an actual homeowner. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to make her sweat. And not just any homeowner, Karen. A defense attorney. Her entire body stiffened. You're a what? I smiled, slow and deliberate. I'm a criminal defense attorney, Karen, I said. I deal with people like you for a living. She visibly paled. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles going white. I wasn't. Oh, but you were, I said. And now we're going to talk about consequences. Before Karen could even try to dig herself out of the hole she had just fallen into, the board members erupted. Karen, what the hell were you thinking? You committed fraud in the HOA's name? Do you have any idea what kind of legal trouble this could bring us? People could sue us over this. Karen was panicking now. I was only trying to. To what? I cut in. Illegally evict someone you don't like. Abuse your position to force a homeowner out of their own house. I shook my head. Karen, this is textbook harassment. You misrepresented your authority and fabricated legal documents. That's not just unethical, it's a criminal offense. One of the board members, an older man with glasses, took off his reading glasses and sighed. Karen, he muttered, rubbing his forehead, we can't protect you from this. Karen's face twisted in horror. You're all turning on me? The board members stared at her like she had grown 3 heads. Turning on you? One of the women snapped. You just dragged the entire HOA into a potential lawsuit. Karen's mouth opened and closed, her face growing redder by the second. And then she snapped. This is my neighborhood, she suddenly shrieked, slamming her hands on the table. I was just trying to maintain order. I spent years keeping this place up to standard, and I will not be disrespected by some hotshot lawyer who thinks he can do whatever he wants. She turned toward me, practically shaking with rage. You don't belong here, she spat. A long, tense silence. And then I smiled. Karen, I said calmly, You just admitted, in front of multiple witnesses, that your actions were driven by personal bias, not any legitimate HOA concerns. Her face dropped. And since you've officially escalated this into a legal matter, I hope you're prepared for what comes next. Karen sputtered. You wouldn't. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough to make her squirm. I absolutely would. The board members didn't even hesitate. She needs to step down. Immediately. She's a liability. Karen whipped around, eyes wide. No. You can't just. We can, the older board member said firmly. And we will. One of the women, who had previously been one of Karen's biggest supporters, let out a huff. Honestly, Karen, you brought this on yourself. Karen let out a strangled sound, but before she could argue, I stood up. Well, I said, dusting off my hands, this has been fun, but I have one last order of business. I turned toward Karen, who was now breathing heavily, looking like she was about to pass out. You might want to lawyer up, I told her. Because I'll be filing formal complaints first thing tomorrow. Karen staggered backward. The room was silent. And then, with a dramatic shriek, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse. Karen's humiliating exit from the HOA meeting was just the beginning. While she had lost her authority, she had yet to face the full weight of the law. And as a defense attorney, I was more than happy to ensure she got the justice she deserved. I spent the next morning drafting and filing formal legal complaints against her. Complaint number 1, fraud and misrepresentation of authority. Karen had fabricated a false legal document, claiming to have eviction powers she didn't actually possess. That alone was criminal. Complaint number 2, harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She had engaged in a pattern of harassment, attempting to remove me from my own property through deception, intimidation, and abuse of power. Complaint number 3, defamation. Her false claims that I was an unauthorized resident had caused damage to my reputation, and I had witnesses, the entire HOA board, to confirm it. Complaint number 4, civil liability for HOA misconduct. While she was no longer HOA president, I filed an official motion for the HOA to be audited to ensure no other illegal actions had taken place under Karen's leadership. Within 24 hours, Karen received a very unpleasant visit from a local law enforcement officer, informing her that she was now under investigation. The cherry on top, the HOA board, desperate to distance themselves from her, refused to defend her. They immediately issued a public statement condemning her actions and making it very clear that she had acted without their approval. They also voted unanimously to ban her from ever holding an HOA position again. But the best part, the absolute best part, Karen was officially fined $10,000 for her misconduct. And when she refused to pay, she was sued by the HOA itself. Her own former supporters were now lining up to take her down. By the time Karen's case went to court, her arrogance had completely disintegrated. She sat at the defendant's table, her usual smug demeanor gone, her hair frazzled, her blazer wrinkled, looking like a shell of the woman who had once terrorized the neighborhood. Her lawyer, some overpriced but clearly exhausted defense attorney, was struggling to build a case. Because, frankly, there was no defense. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, read over the charges carefully. Ms. Hargrove, the judge said, adjusting her glasses, you are accused of falsifying legal documents, harassment, fraud, and abuse of power. These are serious allegations. Karen swallowed hard. Your Honor, I was only trying to. To what? The judge interrupted, her expression sharpening. To remove a lawful homeowner from his own property? Under what legal authority did you believe you had the power to trespass someone from their own home? Karen stammered. I was acting in the best interest of the community. The judge raised a hand. Enough. This court does not recognize Karen law as a legitimate legal framework. The entire courtroom chuckled. I remained stone-faced, watching Karen sweat. The verdict came swiftly. Karen was found guilty of fraud and harassment. She was sentenced to 100 hours of community service. She was fined an additional $5,000. She was legally barred from holding any HOA-related position in the future. Her name was permanently attached to public records of misconduct. And the final nail in the coffin, She was given a formal restraining order, meaning she wasn't even allowed to approach my house again. Her face twisted in disbelief as the judge handed down the ruling. She turned to me, her voice a desperate whisper. "You did this," she hissed. I just smiled. "Karen," I said, leaning in, lowering my voice just enough so only she could hear. "You should have been more careful with your things." Her face turned purple. The court officers led her away. I watched her go, feeling nothing but satisfaction. With Karen legally destroyed, permanently banned from the HOA, and slapped with fines and community service, you'd think that would be the end of it. But no, I had one last card to play. Because while Karen had spent years making life miserable for the neighborhood, I was going to make sure her legacy ended with a bang. See, Karen wasn't just removed from the HOA. Her own neighbors despise her now. The people she had once controlled, fined, and harassed were now openly celebrating her downfall. I could see it in their faces, relief, amusement, and outright joy that the woman who had ruled over them with an iron clipboard was finally powerless. And that's when I had an idea. A beautiful, ironic, poetic idea. Karen had spent years shutting down every fun event in the neighborhood. She banned outdoor BBQs because they were a fire hazard. She canceled Halloween block parties because too much noise disrupts community harmony. She shut down pool parties because she was concerned about property liability. So I decided that to celebrate her removal, I would do the one thing she had always feared most. I organized the biggest block party High-Ridge Estates had ever seen. It started with a simple invitation. I sent out flyers to every homeowner, every homeowner except Karen, inviting them to a massive community celebration. Freedom Fest, celebrating the end of HOA tyranny. Where? The neighborhood clubhouse lawn. When? A Saturday evening, right in front of Karen's house. Theme? The party that Karen never allowed. And the best part, I got official permission from the new HOA president to make it a sanctioned event. Karen couldn't stop it. The block party was a masterpiece. Live music, barbecue grills smoking up the entire street, lawn chairs and tables stretching across the community lot, a massive inflatable bounce house for the kids, a margarita station for the adults, obviously. And the best part, Karen had a front row seat. Her house sat directly across from the clubhouse lawn, meaning she had no way to ignore the spectacle happening right outside her door. And oh, she tried. I watched from a distance as she peeked through her blinds, her face twisted in absolute disgust. She saw the laughter, the people coming together, the very things she had spent years destroying. Then she made her move. She stormed out of her house, marching straight toward me. The crowd parted, everyone watching in anticipation. She stopped right in front of me, eyes wild, fists clenched. "You," she seethed, her voice practically shaking with rage. I grinned. "Hey, Karen. Enjoying the party. You have no right to do this," she shrieked. I gestured to the crowd. "Oh, but we do." I approved in everything. Her face twisted in horror. You manipulated them into this." I tilted my head. "No, Karen. You did this. People wanted a reason to celebrate, and you gave them one." She looked around, realizing that everyone was watching. And worse, they were laughing. Karen had been reduced to a joke in the very community she once ruled. Her lip quivered. "This neighborhood is ruined," she whispered. "You've ruined everything." I smiled wider. "No, Karen. It's finally free." She stood there for a few more seconds, trembling, before turning on her heel and storming back into her house. The crowd erupted into cheers. Karen, the HOA dictator, was officially powerless. And I raised my drink to the sky, letting the sweet taste of victory settle in. Because not only had I beaten her legally, not only had I humiliated her publicly, but I had also given the entire neighborhood something she never could: happiness. And that was justice.